Okay, thanks everybody for joining us again this week. As was mentioned, the topic for today is the Tefillah of Eleno. Eleno is, of course, a Tefillah which we say, so often, over and over and over again at the end of every Tefillah of the day. But as you probably know, Eleno has a particularly close association with the Yamim Nora'im, being as well a centerpiece of the davening on Rosh Hashanah, where Eleno is the introduction to the section of the Rosh Hashanah Musaf known as Malchuyos, the section of the Musaf in which we focus on the theme, which is really the central theme of Rosh Hashanah, the crowning and recognition of God as King. As does each of those sections of the Musaf and Rosh Hashanah, Malchuyos contains 10 psukim from Tanakh that reflect that theme. But in each case, in each section of the Musaf, those psukim are introduced and set up by a tefillah that establishes the theme. And when it comes to Malchuyos, it is Eleno that is the heart of that introduction, of that development of the theme. And when I say Eleno, I'm referring to both paragraphs of Eleno, what we think of as Eleno, and the paragraph of Al Kein Nekav Elecha. In the Rosh Hashanah davening, I should mention, just as an aside, Eleno is also included in the Yom Kippur Musaf. In the Yom Kippur Musaf, it's not really so much an original part of the davening, right? But was borrowed from Rosh Hashanah and put in there as well, since some of those themes are relevant for the entire Aseret Yemei Tshuva. But back to Rosh Hashanah, in the Rosh Hashanah davening, as you remember or you will see in a couple of weeks, Eleno is interrupted in the middle by a couple of brief other tefillos between the two paragraphs. We say Ochila Lakel and the Piyot of Hayei and Pifios. I'm just calling attention to that in order to kind of sweep it away, because those are later additions to the davening. And Eleno and Al Kein Nekav, despite being interrupted in the davening on Rosh Hashanah, really do in their form and originally a combined tefillah, right? They originally were without interruption, and Al Kein Nekav Elecha should in fact be viewed as a continuation, as a follow-up to the paragraph of Eleno, as in fact we are more familiar with it when we say it in the everyday davening, where there is no interruption in between the two paragraphs. And so we are going to be focusing on these two tefillos, which really are what? A lot of times what I find is that when Eleno is discussed, the focus of classes, articles, discussions of Eleno tend to be about a couple of different issues, which I don't really want to focus on today, although I will mention that briefly. One of them is the question of the authorship of Eleno. The discussion of the authorship of Eleno is gets a lot more attention than the authorship of a lot of other tefillos, because there is a very interesting history to the ascribing of the authorship of Eleno. Most famously, there are some traditional sources that ascribe the authorship of Eleno to Yehoshua ben Nun, therefore making this a particularly ancient tefillah. But the consensus is, both among historians and among traditional sources as well, is that is not really the case, certainly not in full, and that most likely Eleno was not written that early. However, it was still written very early. Eleno is otherwise generally ascribed to Rav being from the first generation of the Amoraim, the generation after the Mishnah was compiled. Rav having been associated with the authorship of the Musaf on Rosh Hashanah more generally, and Eleno is of course part of that, and that actually seems to be rather likely, that this tefillah goes back to Rav, and which, despite not being quite as old as Yehoshua ben Nun, still makes it an extremely early tefillah, as things go. There are others who ascribe it to the Anshe Knesset Hagadolah, which is a little bit earlier than Rav. But be that as it may. Okay, so that's just a quick reference to how old this tefillah is, and which gives it a certain gravitas, certain importance that may be greater than some other tefillos. The other topic that often gets a lot of attention when studying Eleno is the well-known controversy over the line in Eleno of Shehem mishtachavim lehevel varikum mispalalim el elo yoshia, a line which is deeply critical of the and almost demeaning towards the worship of other gods, and there is a long history of Christian concern with that line, and as a result, a long history of it simply being erased from the Siddur in many traditions because of a concern of the reaction of the non-Jews. And this is another reason why the question of the authorship of Eleno attained such great significance and such long discussion, because that ended up getting tied in to this issue where the Jews were accused of saying this line, which means that they bow down to nothingness and emptiness, and they mispalim, and they pray to a God who does not save. And the Jews were accused of this line being an explicit reference to as a rejection of Christianity, especially the word "save," which is so central to Christianity, and to say that they bow down to a God who does not save sounded like it was almost composed as a rejection specifically of Christianity, and that caused a lot of there are also certain gematrias that are associated with it. And the early authorship of Eleno was used as one of the responses to this claim, right? Pointing out that it couldn't have been written as a challenge to Christianity because it was written at a time when Christianity was at most in its infancy, and in a context in which Christianity was not the principal ambient religion in the Jewish community, and so on. Okay, so we spent a few minutes just referencing those issues which tend to take center stage a lot in the discussions of Eleno. But I would rather not spend our time on that. I would like to focus on the meaning of the tefillah itself, first in somewhat general terms, and then to do a very close reading of one particular section of the tefillah, which I think has a lot to tell us about its meaning and its purpose. Okay, so let's begin with a quick overview of Eleno, and I'm pulling up the booklet now, and the most obvious fact about the content of Eleno, which is pointed out by everybody who takes the time to look at it, is the glaring contrast between the theme of the first paragraph and the theme of the second paragraph. Before we go into any detail in specific lines of the tefillah, we can just take a quick look that a major theme in the first half of Eleno is distinguishing between the Jewish people and the nations of the world. God did not make us like the other nations. He didn't make our portion like theirs. They worship a meaningless God. We worship the true God, right? One of the clear themes of Eleno is the distinction between the Jewish people and the rest of the nations. Whereas the whole point of the second paragraph of Eleno, of Al Kain Nekavelecha, therefore we put our hope in you, Hashem, to do what, right? What do we hope that Hashem will do? And the whole second paragraph is that saying that we hope that everybody will recognize God, and it won't just be us anymore. There's a certain similarity between this theme and something that we spent a brief time talking about last week when we were talking about Modim and V'chol HaChayim Yodu Chasela. So one of the possible interpretations that we discussed then was that Modim also has this kind of transition from a focus on us to a focus on the rest of the world also offering praise to Hashem. So here too, there's a focus on our praise of God, and then a hope that everybody else will recognize God also. Some of the more modern Jewish writers in the last few hundred years taken pains to emphasize that the meaning of Al Kain Nekavalecha, and this is not apologetics. This is 100% true. That the point of Al Kain Nekavalecha is not that we are hoping for a conversion of everybody to Judaism, right? But rather simply that everybody will recognize the divinity of God. And so obviously that means that one of the things that needs to be understood about this tefillah is the transition from paragraph 1 to paragraph 2. How does the tefillah, start with one focus and continue with a very different focus, especially given the way that the second paragraph begins with Al Kain, right? Therefore, that's because of what we just said in the first paragraph, therefore we hope for what we are describing in the second paragraph. So with that in mind, let's take a quick read through Eleno. I'll see how the tefillah develops, and then we will turn our focus to a couple of things here. Okay, so the tefillah begins, Eleno l'shabech ladon hakol. It is upon us, meaning it is our obligation, it is our responsibility to offer praise to the master of all, to ascribe greatness. Yes.
Rabbi, could you make the cursor bigger, please?
Oh, sure.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I can change the color also, make it more visible. Okay, for some reason it keeps changing into this other thing. I don't know how to change that, but okay. Hopefully this is visible now. So it is our responsibility, our obligation to offer praise and to ascribe greatness to the creator of Bereshis, right? The creator of the book of Genesis. And then we then go on to talk about the Shelo Asanu Ge'er Atzos. God did not make us like the nations of the lands. He did not put us like the families of the earth. Shelo Sam Chalkeinu Kahem. He did not make our portion like theirs. V'gorleinu kechol hamonam, and our destiny like those of their masses. And this is that contested line. Everybody acknowledges that this was originally part of the tefillah. It's just a question of whether it should be continued to be said or not. For they bow down to emptiness and nothingness, and pray to a God who cannot save. V'anachnu, right, and we korim umishtachavim umodim, we kneel and bow down and express our thanks lifnei melech malchei amlochem hakadosh baruch hu, before the King of the Kings of Kings, the Holy One, blessed be He, hakadosh baruch hu, God. I can't resist making a parenthetical comment here, just because I heard this is something I heard in a drasha from the rabbi of my shul just a couple of months ago. Made a very big impression on me, so I wanted to share it, which is that I forgot who he was quoting it from. This is Rabbi Larry Rothwax. I'm not sure if he was quoting it from somebody else or if it was his own idea, but this notion of what does the King of the Kings of Kings mean? There's this notion of kings of kings, right? And then God is the king of those kings of kings. So obviously the simple meaning of that would seem to be that there are, kind of like, emperors, right? There are emperors who have empires, and then there are smaller areas which have their own kings, and those emperors are the kings of those kings, and God is the king of all of them, right? But the idea that he presented was that this phrase takes on a very deeply meaningful interpretation in contemporary times, in our kind of modern Western context, right? In the modern Western context, in a democratic society, so what does it mean to have Malchei Hamlachim, the kings of kings? Who are the kings of kings? Well, the kings of kings are us, right? We're the ones who elect our leaders, and so our leaders are the malachim, and it's the people who are the malchei hamalachim, right? We can kick them out of office. We have control over whether they retain power, and so in our context, there's a certain sense in which melech malchei hamalachim, it means that God is the king of us, and we're the ones who actually have power over the politicians, right? Over the political leaders. There's a lot to say about that. Anyway, like I said, I just wanted to share that parenthetically. Okay, so in this part of the tefillah, as I said, we're describing distinctions between us and the world at large. And then we continue. Shehuno teshamayim v'yosed aretz. God, noteh literally means to like kind of tilt, but here it's just a reference to him having produced the stretched out, as it says here in this translation, the heavens and established the land. It just means he's the creator of the earth. Moshav yikaro b'shamayim mimal, and his seat is up in the heavens. Ushchinasu zov gavhei meromim, and his shechina, his presence, his mighty presence, is up there as well. Hu Elokeinu ein od, he is our God. There is no other. Emes Malkeinu Efes Ulaso, he is our king is true. There is none other like him. As it says in the Torah, and we quote a pasuk about Hashem being the only God. Ein od, there is no other. And that is the God whom we that the Adon Hakol that we were talking about at the beginning. And it's in the wake of this that we say, Al Kain, therefore, Nakavelecha Hashem Elokeinu, we hope, God, to see very quickly, soon, in the real glory of your strength, which will happen when the idols are eradicated. I'm not going to read every line here. And all people will call out in your name. All of the wicked people will turn away from their wickedness, right, and turn towards you. And everybody will recognize that all should kneel before you and swear in your in every language. People, all speakers of all languages will swear in your name, and they will bow down to you and give you honor. And they will all accept upon themselves your kingship. And you will be their king forever. And then we quote the psukim that establish that theme. Now, let's recall now that this tefillah is part of the Musaf of Eleno, the Musaf of Rosh Hashanah, right, and the introduction to Malchuyos. And we see here how this theme is developed of God as the real king, and then followed by the psukim. Now, how did this transition happen? How did we go from what we were talking about in the first paragraph, which was about, the Jews are different from non-Jews, and then suddenly talk about, therefore, we hope for something to change and for everybody to be doing this? Well, in a certain sense, what happened here is that we started off in Eleno talking about the differences between us and them, but in the second half of the first paragraph, when we're actually talking about God, well, how are we describing God? We're describing God as the creator of the world and the one whose Shechina rests up in the heavens, and how ein od, there is no other like him, and establishing God, as we already said in the very beginning, as the Adon Hakol, right, naturally feeds into the notion that, well, we are the ones who are offering praise now, but ultimately, what's the goal of all this? The goal of all this is ultimately for God to be recognized by all, and for his Malchus to be understood universally by humanity, and therefore we hope that that becomes true. Okay, so that's the basic overall theme of Eleno, the theme of the first paragraph, the theme of the second paragraph, how we transition from one to the other. Okay. Let me take a moment to mention one linguistic issue, because it's just, if we're studying Eleno, it would be kind of irresponsible to not mention it, because it's a major question, but we're not going to spend a lot of time on it, which is this phrase, L'takein olam b'malchus Shaddai, that one of the things we are hoping for in the future is, and the way this is that one of the things God will do will be to fix the world under the reign, under the kingship of Shaddai, of God, under his sovereignty. There is a long history to the correct text of this line. Obviously, as many of you probably know, this line is often quoted in the context of the modern idea of tikkun olam, which is so prevalent among non-Orthodox Jews. However, it's very likely that this word is actually a mistake. and that the original text of Eleno had the word litakein with a kuf, not a kuf. Lamed taf kaf nun, litakein olam, like from the phrase, tikon malchuscha or ata konanta, right? Which means to establish or to build, right? And that we want God to build the world b'malchus shaddai and to establish it, not to fix. That's a whole interesting issue.
Or to plan.
That's actually a different shoresh. Okay, the tikon comes from the shoresh kaf nun nun. Whereas the plan comes from a different shoresh of kaf vav nun, I think, or kaf yud nun.
It's the same shoresh.
Okay, so that's our general overview. Now, before we get to the really close reading that I want to do of an important section of this, I do want to spend a few minutes, let me stop the screen share here, talking about one other very important aspect of Eleno, which we must have in mind if we're going to appreciate its purpose and its meaning. And that is, as we mentioned before, that Eleno, what's the original context of Eleno, right? We say Eleno on Rosh Hashanah, and we also say Eleno at the end of every tefillah. But it's important to recognize that the Musaf of Rosh Hashanah is the original context of Eleno. Eleno was originally composed, probably likely by Rav, as we were talking about before, in order to be the opening section of Malchuyos on Musaf and Musaf of Rosh Hashanah. It was not originally composed to be something we say at the end of davening. And in fact, the practice of saying Eleno at the end of davening is something that developed much, much later in history. The earliest attestation we have of Eleno being said at the end of davening is in a book called Machzor Vitri, which was written by one of the students of Rashi. So that brings it to the 12th century. If we look here on the next page in our booklet, this is a selection from the Machzor Vitri and his description of the davening. And right before when he's describing the sequence of davening, at the end he writes, "V'yomru aleinu l'shabeach al kein nekav v'lecha, v'niftarin levatehem l'shalom." They say aleinu, you say al kein nekav v'lecha, and then everybody leaves shul and goes home, hopefully b'shalom, hopefully in peace. So Eleno, so that's in the 12th century. And sometime in the ensuing couple of centuries, it became, or I guess starting somewhat before him, it became commonplace to say Eleno at the end of davening, at least at the end of Shachris, and then in terms of its spreading to various different tefillos that happened at different paces and different places at different times. By the time you get to the Tur, who was in the 1300s at a code of halacha, so he describes mentions Eleno at the end of davening as well, and he's already and in Sephardic lands, the development of saying Eleno happened even later. And it began to spread even, we say Eleno, it became the practice eventually to say Eleno not only at the end of Shachris and the end of Mincha and the end of Ma'ariv, right, but also kind of at the end of certain other things like Kiddush Levana, right? We say Eleno at the end of Kiddush Levana or at a bris, right? After a bris, before you leave, you say Eleno. So this idea that Eleno is a tefillah that we use to conclude things became more and more widespread over the course of history, and as the title of the shir I'm giving today indicates, this produces a very interesting mystery to figure out about Eleno, right? Which is that it's very interesting that Eleno became something that we always say at the end of davening, when in its original context, what was Eleno? In its original context, Eleno was an introduction. right? Eleno was the opening of Malchuyos, right, which leads into the psukim of Malchus Hashem in Musaf and Rosh Hashanah, right? And so apparently there's something about the meaning and theme of Eleno that was originally written as an opening, which despite that makes it work somehow and have some salience as something to say at the end, right? As a conclusion of davening. And that's something that, that's Omer Darshani, that begs some explanation. And whatever we understand to be the central theme or meaning of Eleno should hopefully feed into being able to answer that question. Okay, in terms of Eleno being at the beginning, actually, let me just make a quick note here. What do we say at the very end of Eleno? To go back to this page, right? We say at the end of Eleno, we say two psukim, kakasuv b'sar asacha, and the Hashem, should be the God of the whole world, as it says in the Torah. Hashem yimloch li'olam va'ed, right? May God reign forever and ever. Vin emar, and it also says, vaya Hashem lamelech al kol haaretz, God will be the king over the whole land, and God's name will be one, etc. Where does these psukim come from? So these two psukim are in fact two of the 10 psukim in Malchuyos. Right? So in Malchuyos and Musaf and Rosh Hashanah, this kakasuv b'sar asecha Hashem yimloch li'olam va'ed is the line that comes at the end of this paragraph. But the last line, vaya Hashem lamelech al kol haaretz, that's actually near the end of Malchuyos. So we skip, a lot of the psukim, and then we quote the last pasuk from the Nevi'im that's quoted in Malchuyos in the daily davening we append to the end of Al Kein Nekavelecha, right? You probably remember that the word v'ne'emar is a word that appears over and over and over again in Malchuyos, Zechonos, and Shofros, right? And that's in fact where this comes from. Okay, so let's take a look at just a couple. There are various explanations that are given for this, but let's take a look at a couple of explanations for why Eleno makes sense at the end of davening. Okay, so here is the tour that I mentioned, where the tour says just straight out, we say Eleno at the end of davening. And actually, I'm going to skip this for a moment. We're going to go first here. I apologize for the bad print, but this is an old Sefer, the Sefer, the Siddur Otzar HaTfilos, a very classic commentary on the Siddur. I don't know if people will really be able to read this font, but we'll do our best. So he says here, he's trying to explain, this is the Iyun Tefillah, right, one of the Perushim in the Otzar HaTfilos. He's trying to explain why we took this Tefillah from Musaf Rosh Hashanah and stuck it at the end of davening. He writes, "V'tam amiraso." The reason for saying this, nira be'inai, it seems to me, is, and he comes up with a very kind of surprising explanation. Shehu ke'ein amasla. It's like what's an amasla? An amasla is like an excuse or an explanation for something that went wrong. Okay. And he said it's like an amasla, the ha'ara, and a comment, al kol hatfilos asher hispalalnu ad ko. For all of the davening that we've done until now. In other words, we say Eleno at the end of davening, because Eleno is something we need to say to correct or comment on something about all of the davening we've already done. All the davening already done, shehayu b'sochan tfilos uvakashos al ovdan harishayim. He says there are all sorts of places in davening where we daven for the eradication of the wicked, of the Rishayim. And I didn't think we had enough time, so I didn't highlight all of this. But he quotes here like 4 or 5 different places in davening where that happens. One of the examples is Vinu Malkenu Kalei Kol Tzaru Mastin Me'alenu, or in Tachnun, where we say Orura Gevurascha V'Kinascha Al Oyevecha, that may God awaken his might and his jealousy on his enemies, and so on. So there are various places in the davening where we call upon God to mete out punishment and get rid of the Rishayim. And so what's the point of saying Eleno at the end of davening? So he says, Al kol eila, for all of these things that we say during davening, anachnu meirim ha'ara klalis b'sof tfiloseinu. We make a general comment at the end of our davening. Ki kol ze inenu shovel lanu. That's a borrowing from the language of Megillas Esther. That we all of this, we don't really want any of that. All that stuff that we just said, we don't really like that idea that we're asking God to destroy all of the Rishaim. She'ein roi lispalel al malpalasan shel Rishaim. We don't really. It's not really appropriate to daven for the fall of the wicked. They are also God's creations. And we're not joyful in their fall. And he quotes 2 or 3 different Gemaras that express that theme. Most famously, a comment of Brurio said to her husband Rabbi Meir about getting rid of the sins rather than the sinners. Lefichach, he says, therefore, we at the end of davening we reveal our true feelings about this. Our intent throughout all of those places in davening was never lehispalel avdan harishayim. We never meant to be davening for the destruction of the Rishaim. Ki'im al avdan rish asam. We just want their wickedness to be eradicated. And that's why we say, and that's the theme of the end of Eleno. We daven for the idols to be removed from the earth and to be destroyed. But we're not davening for those who worship them to be destroyed. Rather, yashuvu kulam l'kro b'shem Hashem v'kablu kulam esol machuso. Rather, we're davening for all of them to recognize God and turn to his worship. And he makes the comparison to Malchios, to Rosh Hashanah, to Rosh Hashanah as well. Sorry?
Could you remind us who this text is by?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that. Say that again.
Could you remind us who this text is?
Oh, this is the Perush Iyun Tefillah, which is I apologize, I don't remember his name, but there's a very classic sefer of Perushim on Tefillah, is called the Sidur Otzar HaTefillot. And this is copied from the Sidur Otzar HaTefillot, which has several perushim. The longest one is this one, Iyun Tefillah, and that's where this is drawn from.
Okay, he was before the conservative synagogue was established.
Before the conservative movement, you mean?
Because he seems to be saying takein l'takein olam in the common explanation of takein, as opposed to tikkun.
No! The presence of the kuf in l'takein l'muchus shaddai goes back many centuries. That's not a recent development at all. Basically, every siddur going back a long time has a kuf. It's just that research has been done that indicates that was a mistake that crept in a long time ago. But that text was not introduced by I didn't mean to imply that text was introduced by non-Orthodox Jews. I just meant that it's picked up upon and used by by those movements and in various ways.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to stop the screen sharing. So that's one rather unexpected interpretation of why we say Eleno at the end of davening. Another one, and there are all sorts of explanations that have been given. I'm not going to go through a whole long list. I'll just mention one other one, which is a little simpler than what he said, which goes back to page 4 here in the booklet, which is in the Perush of the Bach, the Bayis Chadash, on the tour. Bach was an important figure in Poland in the 1600s, and he says this. Hatamhu, the reason why we say Eleno is litkoa bilvavenu, to implant in our hearts kodem sheniftarim levatehem, before we go home, yichud malchus shamayim, to the singularity of God, yechazek bilvavenu emunazo sheyavreg ulim haaretz v'hilim karosi karesunos lekinel b'malchus shaddai, and to strengthen in our hearts and minds this belief that one day this will happen, that Hashem lamelech al kol haaretz, that the idol worship will disappear. Ki az, and this is kind of the key point of all of this, right? So then why does it belong dafka at the end of davening? Ki az gam ki yesh l'chol echad mi Yisrael masa umatan im hagoyim ovdei avodah zara v'gilulihem umatzlichim, right? Because what happens after everybody goes home leaves shul, right? Where do they go? Well, they go to work, right? And people go to live their lives throughout the course of the day in a world surrounded by non-Jews, surrounded by the Ovdei Avodah Zarah of the world, and all those many of those Ovdei Avodah Zarah are quite successful in their personally and communally, and so. One of the things that can tend to happen is for a Jew to, even though he went to shul in the morning, to go out into the world for the rest of the day and be impressed with, attracted by, tempted by the world around him, and the religion of the world around him and its successes. And so therefore we say this tefillah so that lo nifne levavenu el ha'alilim velo yala b'machshava chas v'shalom shum hirhur avera, right? So that the purpose of the reason why we say Eleno at the end of davening is because of the theme of that's in Al Kein Nekav Elecha, that before we go out into the world at large where all of that stuff hasn't happened yet, right? And the world around us is dominated by people who are worshiping differently and believe differently, that the last thing we do before we leave shul should be to cement for ourselves the point that, well, we're hoping that changes one day, and we don't want to be sucked into everything that's going on around us. That idea that Al Kein Nekav Elecha fits at the end of davening for that reason is consistent with the fact that that this tefillah was not written to be at the end of davening, and was started to be put at the end of davening when Jews were already in Galus, right? This is not something that goes back to the beginning. Okay.
Excuse me.
Yes.
I once heard Rav Goldwicht explain that is why we don't say Eleno on Yom Kippur at the end of different parts, because we're not leaving shul and going out into the world.
Right. So
which fits in with that idea.
Correct, right? That Eleno is not so much a tefillah that's supposed to be at the end of davening. That's not really the point. It's the point is that Eleno is supposed to be something you say right before you leave, right? And if you're not leaving, you don't have to say it, right? So that's why, and that's not something that's a right. And so that's why we don't say Eleno at the end of Musaf and Yom Kippur, because even though in most contemporary shuls people do leave after Musaf and Yom Kippur, but traditionally, the davening is kind of continuous on Yom Kippur, and that's why there's no Eleno there.
Rabbi,
Okay.
excuse me, who
Yes.
gave that explanation? That what you just said about that we shouldn't be affected by people we go out to do business
That
with?
was the here. Let me pull it up again, see if I can show you I was zooming in. You didn't see the top of the page. Let me just here. Let me make this smaller so I can. Here. This is a page from the tour. Okay. The Code of Halacha written in the 1300s, and one of the commentaries on the tour is the Bayis Chadash. That's what it says here. So that's that commentary. The Bayis Chadash. His name was Rabbi Yoel Sirkis, from Poland in the 1600s, in the 17th century. He's usually known as the Bach, the initials of Bayis Chadash. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Now. This we've done so far has taken us a little longer than I was expecting. So I hope if we don't have time to finish the rest of this today, I guess we will have to have it to finish up next week. But what I'd like to do now, having spent time talking about the overall themes and having spent time talking about where this tefillah belongs in terms of Rosh Hashanah and every day. Let's now turn to, as I said, a close reading of one challenging part of this tefillah, which is really near the beginning. I'm gonna ask you, when I ask this question, to not to. Oh, I haven't had a chance to look at all of them. I saw one quick question in the chat. Let me just, if I apologize for not having explained this, if I didn't. What does the word Eleno actually mean? So Eleno just means upon us. It is upon us, right? It is upon us, l'shabeach, to praise, right? So that's just a way of saying it is our obligation, it is our duty to do so. Okay, so I'm going to throw a question out now, and I'm going to ask for everyone to not look at at the translations that are here right away, and just tell me what you think this means. There's a single letter, a prefix that appears several times here at the beginning of Eleno, and I'm curious what you think it means. Eleno l'shabeach ladon hakol, laseis Gedalyah yotzer brachis. It is our obligation to offer praise to the Master of all, to ascribe greatness to the Creator. Shelo asanu k'goyei ha'aratzos. What does that she mean? He didn't make us like the nations of the earth. It is our duty to do this. What does she mean?
That he didn't.
That. Okay. Anybody else?
Maybe because.
Okay. Maybe because. Okay, excellent. That was we got through that very quickly. There is a very, very obvious ambiguity in this phrase, and which then carries through the whole first half of the first paragraph of Eleno, which is, what are we saying? What do we even mean? Are we saying, when we say Eleno l'shabeach ladon hakol, it is our obligation to praise God, are we praising God that he didn't make us like the other nations? Or is it our obligation to praise God because he didn't make us like the other nations, right? And let's understand how central this difference is to understanding the Tefillah. If you say that she, and of course grammatically it could mean either one, okay? If you say that she means that, okay, then that means that starting with the second line of Eleno, we are immediately starting to fulfill that duty which we mentioned at the beginning, right? Eleno, it is our obligation, l'shabeach, to praise, right? And we are praising him that he made us like other, right? In other words, that's the praise. The praise is, you are great for having done this for us, right? That's so we start praising him. Whereas if you understand the she as meaning because, then what's happening starting in that second line of Eleno is not that we're actually starting to offer the shevach that we said we are obligated to offer. We are rather explaining why we are obligated to do so, right? Why is it dafka Eleno l'shabeach, right? Why is it our burden, right? Why do we have to do this? Why doesn't everybody else have to do it, right? We have to do it because we're different, right? Okay, so that right off the bat is a very important ambiguity in that one, the meaning of that single letter, and we can already see, and we're going to look at this in even more detail momentarily, but you can already see how the difference in interpreting that letter can have massive implications for how we're going to understand the whole, the whole rest of that. The first half to 2/3 of this whole paragraph, because it changes the whole nature of what's going on. Are we actually offering shevach, or are we still explaining why we have to? Okay, and this then carries through, right? What we have here. Let me actually skip down to I'm going to skip all the way down just because, I'll show you. Let's just for a moment, let's look at page 10. This is just the art scroll version again. I don't want to look at the English yet here, but just on the Hebrew side, I've highlighted all of these prefixes, okay, right? And what then happens? We have this series of lines. The v is and, right? So she, A and B, right? So that could mean we are praising God that he didn't make us like the nations of the earth, and he didn't put us like the families of the land. And then, or it could be because he did so, we have to offer Shabbat. And then the next line is the same. She lo sam chalkeinu kahem v'goralenu kachal hamonam. And then again, she hey mishtachavim lehevel horik mispalim elelo yoshia va'anachnu korim mishtachavim umodim ifnei melech machim lachem hakadosh baruch hu. Right? So 3 sections of the Tefillah, each one of which is continuing to talk about the difference between the nations of the world and the Jewish people, just in different ways. Obviously, the last one is a little bit more lengthy, right? Speaking at greater length, they bow down to this and they dive into this, while we, bow down to Melech Machem HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And then even after that, there's another Sheh, right? Which follows up, right? Sheh, huno teshamayim v'yosed aretz, right? He stretches out the skies and establishes he's the creator of the world and so on. Now, I hesitate to include this Sheh with the rest of them, even though it immediately follows all of them. It seems like a sequence, because even though looking at this kind of structurally and syntactically, this seems to be a continuation. Whatever these shehs mean, this sheh also means. There's an argument to be made that this sheh is actually different, because starting from here, the Tefillah is no longer describing differences between the nations of the world and us, right? It starts describing God, right? Huno teshamayim v'yosed aretz, he's the creator and he's up on high and so on, right? So the theme of the Tefillah shifts over here, but looking at it the way I've highlighted things here, right, with the sequence of clauses that begin with this preposition sheh, makes you wonder, is this sheh part of this pattern, or is it somehow a transition to something different? So that's a little bit unclear. Okay.
Rabbi,
but recognize that now it would seem that whichever meaning you're going to give to, putting aside the Shuno Teshamayim one for the moment, but all these other ones, it would seem, just looking at the structure of the Tefillah, that this word, the prefix sheh, should probably mean the same thing all 3 times, right? Either it means that it is our duty to praise God, that he made us different and that he didn't make our portion like theirs, and that they bow to Hevel Varik and we bow before God. Those are all the things for which we are praising him, right? For having done that. Or they all mean because, right? Why is it our duty to pray, to offer praise to God? Because we have special obligations, because he didn't make us like the nations of the world, and because he didn't make our portion like theirs, and because they worship other gods and we're the ones that worship you, and so therefore we have the duty to offer shevach to you.
Rabbi,
yes.
I was taught when I was young that shin is a short for the word asher in Hebrew.
Correct, right? But asher itself can have different meanings.
Yes, but asher can be also for praise. Ashrei yoshvei betecha. Ashrei yoshvei betecha, it's really different things. Yes, asher can have more.
Okay, so I don't. I'm not sure. I don't know. My instinct. This is not something I've ever explored. My instinct is that those 2 words are not actually related. I mean, ashrei comes from the word osher with a shoresh aleph shin reish. The word asher, the connecting word, I'm not sure that has a chataf patach under the aleph. I'm not sure. I don't really. Okay. My sense is that they're not the same word. But that would be interesting if it was a connection there. Okay. So this then raises the question. So how did the various commentators on the Siddur, or when we think of explanations of the Siddur, for those of us, this is an English-speaking audience, we tend to think in terms of translations, right? So how is this translated into English, right? However, anybody who's a translator is going to have to pick a meaning here of this sheh that appears in Eleno. So I want to take a look at just a couple of exemplars of different interpretations of this issue. So if first thing I want to first, let's just take a look back at the Otzer HaTfilos, at that Perush on the Siddur that we looked at earlier. This is on page 6 in the source booklet here, where later on he says this. This is his description of the difference in theme between the first paragraph of Eleno and the second paragraph. He says, "B'chelek harishon mimenu," in the first section, "Anu nosnim shevach v'hoda'ah lahakadosh baruch hu," we offer praise and gratitude to Hashem. Al shehivdilanu min hatoim v'chnisanu tachas kanafav. We offer praise to Hashem for the fact that He distinguished us from others and brought us under His wings. Right, so clearly He is under, and of Chelek Hasheni, in the second half we pray that everybody else should become like us. Right, that's his right. So he is explicitly understanding that the whole theme of the first half of Eleno is to offer praise and gratitude for the fact that we were chosen, we were made different, that we were given the privilege of being Tachas Kanfei Hashchina. That's the whole purpose of the whole theme of the first half. So he's obviously understanding all the shez as meaning that, right? That we were offering praise that this was done. Just to give you a taste of how kind of I found that this issue, I don't know, seems to be. Let me not try to generalize it. Let's just take a look. If you look here on pages, this is I think 7 and 8 in the 7 and 8 in the booklet. When I refer to the page numbers, I'm referring to the numbers that are actually printed on the bottom of the pages in the booklet. This is the Mitsuda translation of the Siddur. So look how they translate, right? Shelo asanu k'goy haratzos, right? We ascribe greatness. That, right? Just like the Otzer HaTfilos explanation just said, that's the praise we're giving is for the fact that He has not made us like the other nations. That He has assigned a portion like theirs, right? But then suddenly, when it comes to the next one, it switches gears. And when it's translating shehem mishtachavim lehevav arik, it doesn't say that. It says for, which is another way to say because, right? And so I'm not sure why they did that. It's a little strange when you have this sequence of clauses that all have exactly the same form, right? Why would you translate some of them one way and one of them a different way, right? There seems to be a kind of inconsistency here. One possible defense of this, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, is that it could be that they're viewing Shehem Mishtachavim Helvav Arik as not really a separate statement, but as kind of a follow-up to Shelo Sam Chalkeinu Kahem, right? God did not make our portion like theirs. Well, how did He make our portions not like theirs? In that, right, for we, they behave differently than we do. Okay, I don't want to really spend time on that. I don't find that very compelling. So here you have an example of a translation that, at least in my opinion, is kind of being a little messy about addressing this issue and not translating everything in the same way. But at least the first couple of phrases they translate as that, right, which is along the lines of the Otzer HaTfilos, viewing this as the content of the praise. We're praising God for the fact that He made us different. Okay, we only have a few minutes left, so we're not going to be able to finish this, but let's at least try to complete kind of framing the issue and setting it up, and we're going to have to finish the discussion next week. If we look here at this next translation, this is from one of the editions of the Siddur Tehillas Hashem, which is the Chabad Siddur. I don't mean to pick on any particular Siddur. There are obviously 100 English translations of the Siddur out there. I just searched online to see various translations that I could find, and then picked out a few that illustrated this conundrum. So if you, one second. Right, so here, you have another example of a siddur that translation that mixes and matches, right? When it says Eleno shabeach shelo asanu keharatzos, right? It says that we're thanking him that he has not made us like other nations of the world. But then when it comes to the next two, they even in the translation they reinsert we should praise him, right? Like Eleno l'shabeach, and they say why? Because lo samchalkeinu kahem, and because Gar Eleno didn't make Gar Eleno kol hamonam, right? So here you have a much clearer indication of the because explanation. However, it's also a little bit of a mishmash, right? With the first one not being translated that way. Note also, and we're going to have to come back to this, the interesting phenomenon that when it comes to Shehem Mishtachavim Lehevel Varik, to the last one, they don't put in any leading word. They don't say because, and they don't say that. They just present this as if the Sheh wasn't there, as if it's like a new statement, just describing what happens. They bow down this way, while we bow down in a different way. That's intriguing. Okay, I'm not going to go into that last thing yet. Okay, and then now to go back to the art scroll, which we started with, and see how do they translate it. So not surprisingly, because art scroll tends to be a very careful translation. So you wouldn't, it's the kind of translation where you wouldn't expect them to have been mixing and matching, and in fact they don't. Right? Which translation do they choose? They use the word for, which means because, right? Not like the Otzar HaTfilos, right? They take the other route and say that it is our duty to praise God, for he has not made us like the nations of the land, for he has not assigned our portion like theirs, and for they bow to vanity and emptiness, right? But while we bow before him. So according to the ArtScroll translation in full adopts the other view, that this is all just an explanation for why it is our duty to offer shevach, to offer praise. Interestingly, though, when you get to Shehuno Teshamayim v'Yosed Aretz, remember I mentioned before that also starts with Sheh, but on the other hand, seems like it might be something new because it's a new theme. It's not about the differences between us and the nations anymore. You'll notice that the art scroll here ignores the Sheh, right? And just translates as if this is just a brand new statement. He stretches out heaven and establishes a foundation. This is just a description of God. Okay, so it's 2:00, so we're going to have to stop. I apologize for not being able to finish within the hour. So in Yirtzeh Hashem, next week, we will, what I'd like to do is, maybe note one other perush on these lines that introduces an interesting twist. And then what I'd like to do ultimately is to offer an explanation of all of this, to humbly offer what I think is the correct translation here and explanation, and to show how I think that explanation reveals something interesting about Eleno at large, and how that then contributes to understanding the place of Eleno, both as an introduction in Musaf Rosh Hashanah, as well as a conclusion to the davening every day.
Thank you, Rabbi Wellfish. Could you give us your email, because I'd like to send you an idea that you.
Sure, I welcome it. My email address is gberger@yu.edu.
G Berger. Thank you so much.
G Berger. Okay, don't leave out the G, then you'll be emailing my mother. So if you want that. Okay, and it's Berger with an E, not Berger with a U. Berger.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Is there another Hebrew word in prayer that's common that they could have used besides Sheh? attached as a preposition to represent because, or that's pretty much the standard. And they went with chef for a reason.
Right. Okay. So listen, there's always the word key. I mean, it wouldn't be a prefix, but it could just been right. It could be key. Now, the problem is that key also is ambiguous. Key also sometimes has other meanings, right?
Yeah. Okay. Got it.
Rashi and Chumash talks about that all the time. That key has multiple meanings. In more modern Hebrew, there are, we say mipnei sheh, right? But that's not really a formulation that you really see in older Hebrew like that. I don't offhand. I can't think of something that would be clearer. Obviously, if there were, then that would, I assume this is what's behind your question, that would then raise the question, raise the possibility. You always wonder about the possibility of whether the ambiguity was purposeful, right? Right. In other words, that whether if something clear could have been said, maybe this was written in order to encompass both meanings in some way, which is an interesting possibility, but I'm not really sure.
Yeah. Oh, thank you.
Rabbi, can I just comment that in Nusach Sfar, the second paragraph does not begin al-kain.
With the vav at the beginning, ve'al-kain nekavelecha, right?
Because the first paragraph is all because it's our duty to praise God because of this and because of that, and therefore, and so on.
Right. Okay. I'm not. I don't know if I'm understanding how the and changes things in some meaningful way. Well, I'm not sure. What do you mean?
It links the second paragraph with the first, and therefore may all the other nations come to the same position.
Oh, I see. Okay. I guess I think my instinct was that therefore connects them anyway, even without the and. In other words, that therefore is already connecting them. But I see what you mean. Right. You have a similar debate over al hanisim, right? Whether al hanisim begins with the al hanisim or without or not. Okay. If I can take a minute to go through the chat if there were any questions here that I didn't address.
Is there any, as you're reading through the chat, don't worry, do two things at once. Is there any connection in translating between when you have the chef followed by the vav, and, but when there's no and, the chef will stand, when it's coupled with a complementary phrase like and versus just the shed, a blanket statement.
You're saying would the presence of the second clause or the lack thereof have any impact on whether to interpret sheh as because? I don't see that would make a difference. It's one of the things one of the quirks here is that the ands are not all the same, right? The first couple of the first cup pair and the second pair are just kind of pairs. Each half of the pair says the same thing, whereas the third pair is a contrast, right? The first half is what they do, and the second half is what we do, right? So they're not really completely parallel in that sense. Okay, somebody asked about a recommendation of a book about the history of the prayers, akin to how I analyzed Eleno. You mean specifically history, or
just the way that you learn, the books that then we can take from you because you inspire us. And to learn about this and say, okay, and that sort of do the same thing you do that you learned from the history of prayer, the connections you made that take our prayer apart like that.
Well, okay, so there are two separate things here. There's the history, and then there's the taking the prayer apart. Those are two very different things.
Whichever you care to.
In other words, so there's the history, and then there's the
I think the analysis.
The analysis, right? So listen, there are various perushim on the siddur. If you're looking for something in English.
English as of now. I'm not like Debbie and the rest. There are some classics that have been translated into English. So for example, that were not originally in English. So for example, Rav Shamshon Raphael Hirsch has a perush on the siddur. Has a siddur. There's the famous World of Prayer by Eli Monk. Which has been translated into English a long time ago. Rav Kook has a perush on the siddur. I'm not sure if that's been translated. That's
and then in terms of history, so there's a book called the Encyclopedia of Jewish Prayer, written by Macy Nunn was his name. There's an older work that is more sort of admired by scholars, by a scholar by the name of Elbogen, Elbogen. It also kind of like an encyclopedia on Tefillah. I forgot its exact name. I think it was originally written in German, but it's available in English. I mean, and more. You know, I don't know where you live, but you know, my answer for someone who lives in the New York area would be to get over to the Mendel Gottesman Library at Yeshiva University and go to the shelf where they have the Sidurim and then have a party for, you know, you could spend a week probably looking at every one, you know.
Oh, okay, yeah, no, here in Los Angeles. Okay. But
no,
thank you so much.
Okay. Somebody asked about the difference, specifics of using different names of God. So that's a, you know, in Shakai and so on, you know, that's a vast topic, which, you know, goes well beyond the scope of Eleno, and it's not something I can really address here, but it's of course an important question. Okay, a couple of comments here. Okay. Okay, all right. I think I've gone through the questions here. Have a great week, everyone. And I'll see you the other end of Slichos night next Mirza Hashem next Monday. Next Tuesday, not Monday. Sorry. Okay,
Thanks again. Thanks so much. Be well.